A millionaire CEO is stopped by a poor little girl who insists on reading his palm. She reveals a hidden illness he didn't know he had, and her words save his life. In a shocking twist, he discovers she's his daughter from a lost love, and they reunite as a family. Before we begin, tell me something about where you live. What's the weather like today? The October wind cut through Manhattan's financial district like a blade, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. Richard Morrison pulled his charcoal coat tighter as he strode down Wall Street, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the pavement in a rhythm that matched his racing thoughts. At 42, he commanded a real estate empire worth $300 million. But today felt different, heavier somehow. The quarterly board meeting had been brutal, shareholders questioning his aggressive expansion into Chicago, whispers about his health after he'd nearly collapsed last week during the presentation to the pension fund investors. Just stress, he'd told everyone, including himself. But the chest pains were getting worse, and sleep had become a stranger. The night sweats left his expensive Egyptian cotton sheets drenched. And he'd lost 15 pounds in 2 months without even trying. His personal physician, Dr. Williams, had suggested it was executive burnout and prescribed meditation apps and vacation time. Richard had ignored both recommendations, throwing himself deeper into work, as if success could somehow cure whatever was eating away at him from the inside. As he approached his favorite cafe, Bella's Corner, Richard's mind was consumed with the afternoon's merger discussions. The Chicago deal represented everything he'd worked toward, a 30-story luxury residential complex that would cement his reputation as Manhattan's most innovative developer. But something felt wrong about it. Though he couldn't pinpoint what, that's when he noticed her, a small girl, maybe 8 years old, sitting cross-legged on the sidewalk beside a cardboard sign that read, "Palm Readings, $5, in careful, childish handwriting. Her dark hair was tangled and needed washing, her clothes too thin for the October chill. But her eyes, those eyes were ancient, wise beyond her years. She sat with perfect posture despite the cold concrete, as if she'd been waiting specifically for him. "Sir," she called out as he passed, her voice clear and confident despite the traffic noise. "Your left shoulder hurts more in the morning, doesn't it? And you've been having trouble sleeping on your right side." Richard stopped mid-stride, his blood turning cold. How could she possibly know about his shoulder? He'd been hiding that pain for months, attributing it to sleeping wrong or spending too many hours hunched over his laptop. The detail about sleeping on his right side was something he'd never mentioned to anyone, not even his doctor. He turned slowly, studying the child's face with the calculating gaze he used in boardroom negotiations. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" The girl stood gracefully, brushing dirt from her faded jeans, with hands that seemed too small to hold such certainty. "You favor your right side when you walk, like you're protecting something. And you press your hand here," she demonstrated, touching the left side of her chest, "when you think no one's looking. It happens most when you're stressed or when you climb stairs." A chill ran down Richard's spine that had nothing to do with the weather. This was impossible. He was about to walk away, to dismiss this as some elaborate street scam, when she spoke again. "The dreams about water started 3 months ago. You're always trying to reach something. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's just light, but the current's too strong. You wake up gasping, don't you? Like you've been drowning." Richard's briefcase slipped from his suddenly numb fingers, hitting the pavement with a dull thud. The recurring nightmare, he'd never told anyone about it. Not his ex-wife during their marriage, not his therapist after the divorce, not even himself until now. How could this street child know details about his most private torments? "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the Manhattan traffic. "I'm Luna," she said simply, as if her name explained everything. "And you're dying." "But you don't have to." The words hit Richard like a physical blow, reverberating through his chest with the force of absolute truth. People rushed past them on the busy sidewalk, lawyers hurrying to court dates, bankers clutching their phones, tourists snapping photos, but he felt frozen in place, staring at this impossible child who'd just delivered his worst fear with the casualness of commenting on the weather. "That's ridiculous," he said, but his voice lacked conviction even to his own ears. His hands were trembling now, and he shoved them deep into his coat pockets. "You're just a kid trying to make money from gullible tourists. This is Manhattan. Everyone knows the tricks." Luna tilted her head, studying him with those unsettling eyes that seemed to see straight through his carefully constructed armor of wealth and success. When she spoke, her voice carried a sadness that no 8-year-old should possess. "Your mother's name was Eleanor. She died when you were 16, ovarian cancer, stage 4. It took 8 months from diagnosis to the end. You still keep her wedding ring in your desk drawer at the office, second drawer down, behind the contract folders, and the emergency medication you pretend you don't need." Richard's knees nearly buckled. Eleanor's ring was his most guarded secret, something he'd never shared with anyone in 26 years. Not his ex-wife Sarah during their 5-year marriage, not his business partners during late-night strategy sessions, not even his therapist, Dr. Reeves, during those dark months after the divorce when he'd seriously considered ending everything. "You bought the ring from her finger the day after the funeral," Luna continued, her voice gentle but relentless. "The funeral director said families usually keep them, but you couldn't bear to wear it or put it away. So you keep it where you can see it when you're making important decisions, because she always helped you think clearly." "How do you?" he began, but Luna was already moving, settling back onto the sidewalk with a fluid grace that reminded him heartbreakingly of Eleanor's careful movements during her final weeks. "Give me your hand," she said, patting the concrete beside her. "Please. I know you're scared. You've been scared for months, maybe years. But ignoring it won't make it go away, and you're running out of time." Against every rational instinct, every lesson learned in boardrooms about not showing weakness, Richard found himself kneeling beside her. The concrete was cold through his expensive suit pants, probably ruining the fabric, but he barely noticed. Luna's small hands were surprisingly warm as she took his right hand, turning it palm up with the reverence of someone handling something precious. "You see these lines?" She traced a pattern with her finger, her touch sending tiny shocks through his nervous system. Most people think palm reading is about the future, but it's really about the present. Your body's been trying to tell you something for months, sending you signals you keep explaining away. She pressed gently near his wrist, and Richard winced. There was tenderness there he hadn't even realized existed, a dull ache that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Lymph nodes," Luna said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "They're swollen. Have been for at least 3 months. You've been having night sweats that leave your sheets soaked, losing weight without trying even though you're eating the same amount, and you're more tired than usual, even after sleeping. You thought it was stress from the Chicago expansion, but stress doesn't cause these specific symptoms in this particular combination." Richard pulled his hand back, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. "You're describing half the executives in Manhattan. Everyone's stressed, everyone's tired, everyone's working too hard." "No," Luna said softly, her eyes filled with a compassion that seemed impossible for someone her age. "Not everyone has Hodgkin's lymphoma." The medical term hung between them like a death sentence, the words seeming to echo off the surrounding buildings. Richard had Googled his symptoms weeks ago during a sleepless night, had seen that phrase, but had dismissed it as internet paranoia, the kind of medical hysteria that turned every headache into a brain tumor. Hearing it from this child's lips, spoken with such quiet certainty, made it terrifyingly real. "You need to see a doctor," Luna continued. reaching into her small backpack and pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. "Tomorrow, Doctor. Sarah Chen at Mount Sinai Hospital. She's expecting you at 2 o'clock. "She's expecting me? How is that possible? I don't even know who that is." Luna smiled for the first time, and for a moment she looked like any other 8-year-old. Gap-toothed, innocent, full of secrets and wonder. Some things can't be explained, only experienced. "Will you go?" Richard stared at her for a long moment, studying the piece of paper with Dr. Chen's name and office number written in Luna's careful handwriting. Everything logical in his mind screamed that this was impossible. Elaborate street theatre designed to separate him from his money, but something deeper. Some instinct he'd learned to ignore in his climb to success told him this child was offering him something more valuable than all his real estate holdings combined. "Yes," he said finally, "I'll go." As he stood to leave, brushing dirt from his suit, he pulled out his wallet and placed a $100 bill beside her sign, then added 4 more 20s. "Keep the change," he said hoarsely. "Mr. Morrison," Luna called as he walked away, her voice carrying clearly over the traffic noise. "One more thing, the woman in the red coat. She'll be in the hospital lobby tomorrow. Don't ignore her this time." Richard turned back, a question forming on his lips. But Luna was already gathering her things with practiced efficiency, folding her cardboard sign and slipping it into her backpack. Within moments, she had disappeared into the crowd like smoke, leaving him standing alone on the sidewalk with nothing but a piece of paper and the growing certainty that his life had just changed forever. "Doctor." Sarah Chen's office overlooked Central Park, but Richard couldn't focus on the autumn view. His hands shook as he held the test results, the medical terminology blurring together until only one phrase remained clear. "Stage 2, Hodgkin's lymphoma." "We caught it early," Dr. Chen was saying, her voice gentle but professional, "with proper treatment. The survival rate is over 90%. You're going to be fine, Mr. Morrison." But Richard barely heard her. He was thinking about Luna, about how she'd known. The appointment had been surprisingly easy to schedule. Dr. Chen's office had called him back within hours, saying they'd had a cancellation and could see him immediately. "I have to ask," Richard said, interrupting the doctor's explanation of treatment options. "How did you know to expect me? I never scheduled this appointment." Dr. Chen frowned. "I'm not sure what you mean. Your advocate called yesterday. She said you'd be coming in with symptoms consistent with lymphoma and that we should prioritize your case." "My advocate?" "A young woman. She wouldn't give her name, but she described your symptoms with remarkable accuracy. She seemed very concerned about you." Richard left the hospital in a daze. The treatment would be aggressive. Chemotherapy starting next week, followed by radiation. He'd have to step back from the company, something he'd never done in 20 years of building his empire. As he walked through the lobby, a flash of red caught his eye. A woman in a red coat was sitting in the corner reading a magazine. She looked up as he approached, and Richard's breath caught. "Maria," he whispered. The woman was older than he remembered. Lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 15 years ago, but it was definitely Maria Santos, the woman he'd loved and lost through his own foolish pride. "Hello, Richard," she said softly. "I heard you were sick. How did you? What are you doing here?" Maria closed the magazine and stood. "Luna told me you'd be here today. She said you'd need a friend." "Luna?" Richard's mind reeled. "You know Luna?" "She's my daughter, Richard. Our daughter." The hospital lobby seemed to tilt around him. Richard grabbed the nearest chair for support, staring at Maria with complete shock. "That's impossible," he managed. "We haven't seen each other in 15 years. 14 years, 8 months, Maria corrected gently. "I was pregnant when you left for London. I tried to tell you, but you were so focused on the European expansion, so determined to prove yourself after your father's death. I left 3 messages, but you never called back." Richard's legs gave out completely. He sank into the chair. Remembering those final weeks before his departure, he'd been consumed with grief over his father's sudden heart attack, throwing himself into work to avoid dealing with the pain. He'd ignored everyone, including Maria. "I raised her alone," Maria continued, sitting beside him. "I wanted to contact you when she started showing abilities, but I was afraid you'd think I was crazy, or worse, that you'd try to take her away." "Abilities? Luna sees things, Richard. She always has. She told me about your illness 3 months ago, insisted we had to find you. She said her daddy was in trouble and needed help." Richard's chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from the lymphoma. "She called me her daddy? She's always known about you. I have photos, told her stories. She's been waiting her whole life to meet you." As if summoned by their conversation, Luna appeared beside them, seemingly from nowhere. "Did you go to the doctor?" she asked Richard seriously. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were right. About everything." Luna nodded solemnly. "Mom says you're going to fight it, that you're stronger than you know." "Luna," Richard said, kneeling to her level, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know about you, if I had." "You weren't ready then," Luna said simply. "But you're ready now. That's why I found you." The chemotherapy suite at Mount Sinai was nothing like Richard had expected. Instead of the sterile, depressing environment he'd imagined, it was bright and comfortable, with large windows and recliners arranged in a semicircle. Luna sat beside him during his first treatment, her small hand wrapped around his as the IV dripped medication into his system. "Tell me about the palm reading," Richard said, trying to distract himself from the needle in his arm. "How long have you been able to do that?" "Since always," Luna said, coloring in a book Maria had brought. "Mom says I used to predict when people would visit before they even knew they were coming. I thought everyone could do it." "It doesn't scare you, seeing things others can't?" Luna looked up at him with those wise eyes. "Does being rich scare you?" Richard laughed despite himself. "Sometimes, yes. Same thing. It's just something you learn to live with." Maria approached with coffee from the hospital cafe, and Richard marveled at how natural this felt, the 3 of them together like a family. How had he not known what he was missing? "The doctors say the first few treatments are the hardest," Maria said, settling into the chair across from them. "But Luna insisted you'd handle it better than most patients." "Oh, really?" Richard smiled at his daughter. "And why is that?" "Because you're stubborn," Luna said matter-of-factly. "Mum says, I get it from you." Over the following weeks, Richard's world transformed completely. He'd stepped back from daily operations at Morrison Holdings, leaving his capable team to handle the business while he focused on treatment. For the first time in decades, he wasn't working 18-hour days. Instead, he was learning to be a father. Luna visited him every day, sometimes with Maria, sometimes alone when her mother was working at the community center where she'd been employed for the past 10 years. Richard discovered that his daughter was brilliant, reading at a high school level, with an intuitive understanding of human nature that went far beyond her years. "She's never been to school," Maria explained one afternoon as they watched Luna help another patient with his crossword puzzle. "I've been homeschooling her. Traditional education doesn't really work for children like Luna." "Children like Luna?" "Gifted, sensitive. She absorbs emotions from everyone around her. A regular classroom would overwhelm her." Richard watched Luna whisper something to the elderly man, who suddenly smiled for the first time since Richard had been coming to the center. She had a gift for knowing exactly what people needed to hear. "I want to help," Richard said. "With her education, with everything. I've missed 8 years of her life. I don't want to miss any more." Maria studied his face carefully. This isn't guilt talking. You're not trying to make up for lost time by throwing money at the situation. No, Richard said, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. Well, maybe a little, but mostly I just want to be her father, if you'll let me. It's not up to me, Maria said softly. It's up to Luna. As if she'd heard her name, Luna appeared beside them with a shy smile. Daddy, she said, using the word for the first time. The man in bed 7 wants to know if you'll teach him about the stock market. He says he's always wanted to learn, but he's scared he's too old. Richard's heart swelled. Of course I will. Will you help me? I don't know anything about stocks, Luna said. No, but you know about people, and that's the most important part. The chemotherapy was brutal, but Richard endured it with a strength that surprised everyone, including himself. Luna's predictions proved accurate. His body responded better to treatment than most patients. By his 6th session, the doctors were already talking about reduced tumor size and improved blood counts. You're a fighter, Dr. Chen said during a follow-up appointment. Your daughter said you would be. She's remarkable, Richard said, watching Luna through the office window as she chatted with the nursing staff. I still can't believe she's mine. Genetics are powerful things, Dr. Chen observed. She has your eyes, your stubborn streak, and clearly your survival instincts. That evening, Richard took Luna and Maria to dinner at his favorite restaurant, a small Italian place in Little Italy that he'd discovered years ago. Luna ordered spaghetti and made a mess of her white shirt, laughing when the sauce splattered. Mom never lets me eat spaghetti with white clothes, she confided to Richard. Well, tonight's special, Richard said, dabbing sauce from her chin. Besides, I own about 50 white shirts. You can borrow one. Are you really rich, like Mom says? Luna asked innocently. Luna, Maria warned. But Richard held up a hand. It's okay. Yes, I am. Does that bother you? Luna considered this seriously. Will you still love me if I'm not rich? The question hit Richard like a physical blow. Oh, sweetheart, I'll love you no matter what. Rich, poor, healthy, sick, nothing could ever change that. Good, Luna said, returning to her spaghetti. Because I want to help poor kids like me, the ones who live on the streets. Richard exchanged a look with Maria. What do you mean, honey? There are lots of kids downtown who don't have homes. They're hungry and cold. I want to help them, but I don't know how. Maybe, Richard said carefully, we could figure out how to help them together. Luna's face lit up. Really? We could build them a place to stay? We could try. That night, after dropping Maria and Luna at their modest apartment in Queens, Richard sat in his empty penthouse overlooking the city. The space that had once felt impressive now seemed hollow, filled with expensive furniture, but lacking the warmth he'd experienced in their cramped 2-bedroom home. He pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. James, it's Richard. I need you to draw up some papers. I want to establish a foundation. Something focused on housing and education for homeless children. That's wonderful, Richard. What's the inspiration? Richard looked out at the city lights, thinking of his daughter's compassionate heart. I've recently been reminded of what really matters, he said, and I want to make sure other children don't have to grow up the way Luna did, wondering if their father cares about them. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Dr. Chen called personally, her voice excited but professional. Richard, I have incredible news. Your latest scans show the tumors have shrunk by 70%. At this rate, you'll be in complete remission within months. Richard closed his eyes, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders that he'd been carrying for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to be free of it. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me. Thank your medical team, your positive attitude, and whatever forces brought you to treatment when you did. A few more months, and we might be having a very different conversation. After hanging up, Richard sat in his office, staring at the photo on his desk. a picture Luna had drawn of the three of them holding hands under a rainbow. She'd given it to him after his third treatment, saying it was to remind him that storms always end. His assistant knocked and entered with a worried expression. "Mr. Morrison, there's a woman here to see you. She says she's Luna's teacher, but she seems upset." Richard's blood ran cold. "Send her in immediately." The woman who entered was middle-aged, with kind eyes and worry lines creasing her forehead. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Sarah Williams. I run the community center where Maria works. I'm also Luna's unofficial guardian when Maria's at work." "What's wrong? Is Luna okay?" "She's missing," Sarah said. "She disappeared from the center this morning. We've looked everywhere, called the police. Maria's frantic. Luna left this for you." She handed him a crumpled piece of paper with Luna's careful handwriting. "Daddy, I had to go help someone. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. I love you." The police station buzzed with activity as Richard paced the waiting area, his mind racing with terrible possibilities. Detective Martinez, a tired-looking man in his 50s, emerged from an interview room, shaking his head. "Still no sign of her," he said, "but we've got officers checking every location Luna's been known to frequent. Kids her age don't usually go far from familiar areas." Maria sat hunched in a plastic chair, her face pale with worry. "She's never done anything like this before. Luna's responsible." "Careful. She wouldn't just disappear without telling me." "You said she left a note about helping someone?" Detective Martinez asked Richard. "Yes, but she didn't say who or where." Richard pulled out his phone for the 100th time, hoping for some miracle message. "She has these intuitions about people. Maybe she sensed someone was in trouble." "Intuitions?" The detective's eyebrows rose skeptically. "She's gifted," Maria said quietly. "She sees things others don't. That's how she knew about Richard's illness before he did." Richard was about to explain when his phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Daddy?" Luna's voice was small, scared. "I'm sorry I ran away, but I had to help Tommy." "Luna, where are you? Are you hurt?" "I'm at the old warehouse on Pier 47. Tommy's really sick and his dad hurt him bad. I couldn't leave him alone." Richard's heart pounded. "Stay exactly where you are. Don't move. I'm coming to get you." "Daddy, bring a doctor. Tommy might die if we don't help him soon." The line went dead. Richard was already moving, Detective Martinez close behind. "I know that warehouse," the detective said grimly. "It's been abandoned for years. Drug dealers, homeless camps, not a safe place for a child." The drive to the waterfront felt endless. Richard's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. How had Luna known about this Tommy? How had she found him? The warehouse was a hulking structure of rusted metal and broken windows, the kind of place that appeared in nightmares. Police cars surrounded the building as Richard and Maria arrived, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows on the surrounding buildings. "There." Detective Martinez pointed to a first-floor window. "That's where the call came from. They found Luna in a corner of the vast, empty space, kneeling beside a boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. The child was unconscious, his face swollen and bruised, breathing shallow and labored. "Tommy," Luna whispered as Richard approached. "I tried to help him, but I'm not strong enough." "You did perfect, sweetheart," Richard said, scooping his daughter into his arms. "The paramedics are here now." As the medical team worked on Tommy, Luna buried her face in Richard's chest. "I saw him in a dream," she said. "He was calling for help, but no one could hear him except me. His daddy hurt him and left him here to die." "How did you know where to find him?" "I just did, like how I knew about you being sick." Detective Martinez approached with a grim expression. "We found the boy's father passed out drunk in the next room. This place reeks of alcohol and neglect. Tommy's been living here for weeks, maybe months." "Will he be okay?" Luna asked. "Thanks to you, probably yes. You saved his life." As they waited for the ambulance to leave, Richard held Luna close, marveling at his daughter's courage and compassion. She'd risked everything to save a stranger, a child she'd never met, but somehow knew needed help. "I'm sorry I scared you," Luna said, "but I couldn't let Tommy die." "You did the right thing," Richard said, "but next time tell us what you're planning. We want to help too." "Promise?" "Promise." Maria joined them, tears streaming down her face. "I was so scared," she whispered, embracing them both. "We're okay," Richard said, and for the first time in months he truly meant it. "We're all okay." As they walked out of the warehouse together, Luna looked up at him with those wise eyes. "Daddy, I think it's time." "Time for what?" "Time for us to be a real family, all of us together." Richard stopped walking, his heart full of an emotion he couldn't name. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you," Luna said with a smile that lit up her entire face. "I think you should marry Mom." Luna's words hung in the air like a challenge to destiny itself. Richard stared at his 8-year-old daughter, then at Maria, whose cheeks had turned crimson at the innocent suggestion. "Luna," Maria said gently, "marriage isn't something children arrange for their parents." "Why not?" Luna asked with the logical simplicity that only children possess. "You love each other. I can see it in your colors." "Our colors?" Richard asked, fascinated despite his embarrassment. "Everyone has colors around them. Yours and Mom's get brighter when you're together. And they match." Richard had learned not to question Luna's unique perceptions. Over the past month of treatment, he'd watched her accurately predict everything from weather changes to which nurses would be working each shift. If she said their colors matched, who was he to argue? "It's complicated, sweetheart," Maria said, sitting on a nearby bench. "Your father and I hurt each other a long time ago. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight." "But you're different people now," Luna insisted. "Daddy's sick made him remember what's important. And Mom, you're not scared anymore." "Scared of what?" Richard asked. Maria looked down at her hands. "Of you rejecting us again. Of Luna getting attached to someone who might disappear when things get difficult." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. He knelt beside the bench, taking Maria's hands in his. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I know I have to prove that, but I'm not the same man who left 15 years ago. Cancer has a way of clarifying your priorities." "Dad," Luna said suddenly, her voice taking on that distant quality it got when she was sensing something. "There's something else. Something I haven't told you." "What is it, honey?" "The reason I found you when I did. It wasn't just about the cancer." Luna's eyes were wide, serious. "Something bad is coming. Something that's going to try to take you away from us." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of something?" "I don't know exactly, but it's connected to your work, to the company, and it's going to happen soon." Before Richard could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from his assistant. "Emergency board meeting called. Hostile takeover attempt. Need you here immediately." Richard stared at the screen, then at Luna. "How did you?" "I told you, Daddy. I see things." The emergency board meeting was chaos. Richard's business partner of 12 years, David Chen, sat at the head of the conference table with a smug expression that Richard had never seen before. "Gentlemen," David announced to the assembled board members, "I think we all agree that Richard's health issues have compromised his ability to lead this company effectively." "That's ridiculous," Richard said, taking his seat. "I've been in treatment for 6 weeks. My responsibilities have been handled perfectly by the team." "Have they?" David slid a folder across the table. 3 major clients have expressed concerns about continuity of leadership. Our stock price has dropped 12% since news of your illness leaked." Richard opened the folder, scanning the documents with growing horror. Client complaints, financial projections, even a psychological evaluation questioning his mental fitness, all dated within the past week. "Where did you get this?" Richard demanded. "I've been conducting my own investigation into the company's stability. The board has a right to know if our CEO is capable of performing his duties." Richard looked around the table, at faces he'd known for years. Some avoided his gaze, others looked genuinely conflicted. "I'm in remission," Richard said. "Dr. Chen confirmed it yesterday. I'll be back to full capacity within weeks." "That's not the only concern," David continued. "There are also questions about your recent distractions, spending company time on personal matters, using corporate resources for charitable foundation work." "The foundation helps homeless children. It's legitimate charitable work. It's also a tax shelter that benefits you personally. And your sudden interest in these causes coincides suspiciously with your illness and this convenient family reunion." Richard's temper flared. "Watch your tone when you talk about my family." "That's exactly what I'm talking about," David said triumphantly. "Your judgment is compromised. You're making emotional decisions instead of business decisions." The meeting continued for 2 hours, with David systematically dismantling Richard's position. By the end, a vote of no confidence had been called for the following week. Richard left the building feeling shell-shocked. Everything he'd built over 20 years was crumbling. And he couldn't understand why. David had been his closest friend, his most trusted ally. What had changed? When he arrived at Maria's apartment, he found Luna waiting by the window. "It's starting," she said simply. "What's starting?" "The bad thing I saw. But, Daddy, you need to know something about Mr. Chen." "David, what about him?" Luna's expression was troubled. "He's not the one in charge. Someone else is telling him what to do. Someone who wants to hurt our family." Richard sat down heavily on the couch. "Who, Luna? Who wants to hurt us?" "I can't see clearly yet, but tomorrow we'll find out." The next morning brought a revelation that shattered Richard's understanding of everything. Luna had woken up screaming from a nightmare, her small body trembling as she described visions of fire and destruction. "The building," she gasped between sobs. "Our building is going to burn, and someone's going to get hurt." "What building, sweetheart?" Maria asked, stroking Luna's hair. "The shelter. The one Daddy's building for the homeless kids. They're going to burn it down tonight." Richard's blood ran cold. Construction on the Morrison Foundation's first homeless shelter had begun just 2 weeks ago. It was supposed to be a surprise, a grand opening timed to coincide with his return to full health. "Luna, are you sure about this?" Richard asked gently. "I can smell the smoke," Luna whispered. "And I can see him. The man who's really behind everything." "Who?" "Your brother." Richard's world tilted. "Luna, I don't have a brother." "Yes, you do. Your father's other son, the one nobody talks about." Maria looked confused, but Richard felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. His father had been secretive about his past, had traveled frequently when Richard was young. There had been whispers, rumors that Richard had chosen to ignore. "What's his name?" Richard asked. "Marcus. Marcus Morrison, and he's been waiting a long time to take everything away from you." Richard spent the day investigating, making calls to old family friends, digging through records his father had kept locked away. By evening, he had confirmation of what Luna had seen. Marcus Morrison. Born 2 years before Richard to a woman his father had never married, raised in poverty while Richard enjoyed privilege. "He's been planning this for years," Richard told Maria as they sat in the hospital cafeteria. "Using David as his inside man, gathering information, waiting for the right moment to strike." "But why now?" Maria asked. "Because I'm vulnerable. The cancer, the time away from work, the foundation, it all makes me look weak, distracted. He's been feeding David information, probably promising him a partnership in the new company." "What are you going to do?" "Stop him," Richard said grimly. Luna was right about the fire. If Marcus is desperate enough to commit arson, he won't stop there. That night, Richard stationed himself across from the construction site with a telephoto camera and a direct line to the fire department. At 2:47 a.m., he saw them, 3 figures in dark clothing carrying gasoline cans. Richard called 911, then watched through his camera lens as the figures doused the wooden framework with accelerant. But as one of them lifted a lighter, Richard saw something that made his blood freeze. David Chen was one of the arsonists. The fire department arrived within minutes, catching the 3 men in the act. But as they were handcuffed and led away, Richard realized this was just the beginning. Marcus had been planning this for years. The arson was probably just meant to distract from something bigger. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You can't stop what's already in motion. By tomorrow, everything you've built will be mine. M. Richard raced back to Maria's apartment, his mind racing. If Marcus was willing to commit arson, what else was he planning? And more importantly, was Luna's family in danger? He found Maria awake, pacing the living room while Luna slept on the couch. She's been having nightmares all evening, Maria said, talking about someone coming to take her away. We need to leave, Richard said urgently. Pack whatever you need. We're going to my penthouse, better security. Richard, you're scaring me. What's happening? Marcus isn't just after my company. He's after everything I care about, and that includes you and Luna. As they gathered their belongings, Luna woke up and grabbed Richard's arm. Daddy! He's already here, in the building. He's been watching us. Richard's blood turned to ice. How long? Since we got home. He's waiting for us to try to leave. Through the window, Richard could see a black sedan parked across the street, a car that hadn't been there when he'd arrived. They were trapped. There's another way out, Maria said suddenly. The fire escape connects to the building next door. We could get to the roof. No, Luna said, her voice taking on that otherworldly quality again. We have to face him. If we run now, he'll never stop hunting us. Luna, you're 8 years old. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is, she said with startling conviction. He's not just angry about money, Daddy. He's angry about love, about having a family, and I'm the family he never had. Richard looked at his daughter, this incredible, brave little girl who saw the world with such clarity, and realized she was right. Running would only delay the inevitable. What do you want us to do? He asked. Let him come up. But Daddy, when he gets here, you have to let me talk to him first. Absolutely not. Trust me, Luna said. I know what he needs to hear. Marcus Morrison looked exactly like Richard had imagined. The same strong jaw, the same piercing eyes, but hardened by years of resentment and struggle. He stood in the doorway of Maria's apartment, impeccably dressed despite the late hour, his presence filling the small space with barely contained rage. Hello, brother, he said, his voice cultured but cold. I've been waiting a long time for this conversation. Richard positioned himself protectively in front of Maria and Luna. What do you want, Marcus? What I've always wanted. What should have been mine from the beginning. Marcus's gaze swept the modest apartment with disdain. Though I see you've developed quite the taste for slumming it. Leave my family out of this. Your family? Marcus laughed bitterly. You mean the woman you abandoned for 15 years and the daughter you didn't even know existed? Some family man you are. Daddy, Luna said quietly, stepping out from behind Richard. Let me talk to him. Luna. No, Maria whispered, but Luna was already walking toward Marcus. You're hurt, she said simply, looking up at him with those wise eyes. Someone hurt you when you were little, and you never got to heal. Marcus's expression faltered for just a moment. What did you say? You lived in foster homes, 12 different ones, and every time you told people who your father was, they didn't believe you. They said you were making it up to feel important. Marcus stepped back as if Luna had struck him. How do you know that? I can see your pain. It's like a dark cloud around you. You've been carrying it for so long, you don't remember what it feels like to be happy. Stop it, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. Your father loved you, Luna continued. He just didn't know how to show it. He was scared of what people would think, scared of hurting his marriage. But he sent you money every month until you turned 18. He sent my mother money, Marcus corrected harshly. Not me, I was just her burden. No, Luna said firmly, he sent it for you. He kept pictures of you in his wallet. My daddy has them now. They were in Grandpa's desk when he died. Richard's mind raced. He did remember finding photos of a young boy in his father's personal effects, but he'd assumed they were old pictures of himself. You're lying, Marcus said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. I don't lie about important things, Luna replied. Would you like to see them? Richard slowly reached for his wallet, pulling out the old photos he'd never really examined closely. As he looked at them now, he could see the differences, subtle variations in features that marked them as pictures of someone else. He wrote on the back of each one, Luna said. Look. Richard turned over the first photo and found his father's handwriting. Marcus, age 7. First day of school, so proud. Marcus snatched the photo from Richard's hand, his carefully maintained composure cracking. This doesn't change anything. He still chose you over me. He didn't choose, Luna said gently. He was trapped by his own fear. But that doesn't mean you have to be trapped by yours. I'm not afraid of anything. Marcus said, but his voice was shaking. You're afraid of being alone forever. That's why you want to destroy everything my daddy built. You think if you take it all away, you'll finally feel like you matter. Marcus's face contorted with pain and rage. I do matter. I'm just as smart as him, just as capable. I built my own company from nothing while he inherited everything. And you did an amazing job, Luna said. You're successful and strong and brave, but you're still not happy, are you? Happiness is a luxury I can't afford. Yes, you can. You just have to stop fighting with the only family you have left. Marcus looked at Richard, then at Maria, then back at Luna. You don't understand. I've gone too far. I've done things. The board meeting, the arson, hiring people to sabotage his company. I can't take it back. You can make it right, Luna said. Uncle Marcus, you can help us instead of hurting us. The word uncle seemed to break something inside Marcus. He sank into a chair, his face in his hands. I wanted him to love me, he whispered. I wanted him to be proud of me the way he was proud of Richard. He was proud of you, Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. I found other things in his desk, newspaper clippings about your business successes, copies of awards you'd won. He was following your career. Why didn't he ever tell me? Because he was a coward, Richard said honestly, and because he was from a generation that didn't know how to fix their mistakes. Marcus looked up at Richard with eyes that were raw with decades of pain. I'm so sorry for everything. We can fix this, Richard said. Together, if you want to. I don't know how. I do, Luna said. First, you call Mr. Chen and tell him to stop the takeover. Then you come to the hospital with us tomorrow for Daddy's last treatment. Then we all go get ice cream and figure out how to be a family. Marcus stared at this remarkable child who had seen through his anger to the wounded boy beneath. You really think it's that simple? Love is simple, Luna said. People make it complicated. The hospital room was crowded but warm, filled with an odd collection of people who had become Richard's chosen family. Marcus sat in the corner, still uncertain but trying, his laptop open as he worked to undo the damage he'd caused to Morrison Holdings. Maria was knitting in the chair beside Richard's bed, her presence a constant comfort, and Luna, ever the little guardian angel, was helping other patients with their crossword puzzles. "The board meeting is cancelled," Marcus announced. Looking up from his computer, "David Chen has been arrested for arson, and I've provided evidence of our conspiracy to the SEC. It's going to be a mess to clean up, but your company is safe." "Our company," Richard corrected. "If you want it to be." Marcus looked surprised. "You'd really want to work with me after everything I've done?" "We're brothers," Richard said simply, "and Luna's right. We're all the family we have left." Dr. Chen entered the room, her face bright with good news. "Well, Mr. Morrison, your final scans are clear. The cancer is gone. You're officially in remission." The room erupted in quiet celebration. Luna abandoned her crossword puzzle to hug Richard, while Maria wiped away tears of relief. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now," Richard said, "we build something together. The foundation, the company, our family, all of it." "Speaking of family," Luna said, with that mischievous smile that Richard had learned to both love and fear, "I think there's something we need to discuss." What's that, sweetheart?" "Mom's birthday is next week, and I think it would be the perfect time for a wedding." "Luna!" Maria protested, her cheeks turning red. "Well, it would be," Luna insisted. "You're both healthy, you love each other, and I want to be a flower girl before I get too old." Richard laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. "How old is too old for a flower girl?" "9, Luna said seriously, "and I'll be 9 in 3 months." "That's not much time to plan a wedding," Maria said, but Richard could see the hope in her eyes. "It's enough time," Richard said, taking her hand, "if you'll have me." "Are you proposing to me in a hospital room?" Maria asked with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. "I'm proposing to you wherever you are," Richard said. "I've wasted too many years already. Maria Santos, will you marry me?" "Say yes," Luna called out, bouncing on her toes. "Yes," Maria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, of course." Adieu. The next week passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Richard had wanted to hire a professional planner, but Luna insisted on doing everything herself, with help from Uncle Marcus, who had thrown himself into the role of devoted family member with the enthusiasm of someone making up for lost time. "She's got you wrapped around her little finger," Marcus observed as they watched Luna direct the florist with the authority of a seasoned wedding coordinator. "Completely," Richard agreed, "and I wouldn't have it any other way." The wedding was small but perfect, held in the garden behind the community center where Maria worked. Luna had been right about being the perfect flower girl. She walked down the aisle with such dignity and grace that half the guests were in tears before Maria even appeared. When Maria did walk down the aisle, wearing a simple white dress that made her look like an angel, Richard felt his heart stop. She was beautiful, but more than that. She was his partner, his love, his future. "You look nervous," Marcus murmured as they waited at the altar. "I'm terrified," Richard admitted. "What if I mess this up again?" "You won't," Marcus said with surprising confidence. "You're not the same man who left 15 years ago, and besides, Luna won't let you." As if she'd heard her name, Luna turned from her position at the front of the aisle and gave Richard a thumbs up. He laughed, feeling the last of his anxiety melt away. The ceremony was beautiful, but Richard barely heard the words. All he could focus on was Maria's radiant face and the knowledge that he was getting a second chance at the life he'd always wanted but had been too afraid to claim. "You may kiss the bride," the minister announced. As Richard kissed Maria, he heard Luna's voice calling out, "Finally!" The reception was held in the community center, with Luna serving as unofficial master of ceremonies. She made a toast that brought everyone to tears, thanking Daddy Richard for finding them and Uncle Marcus for helping make their family complete. "Now we can help all the other kids who need families," she announced, "because we have enough love to share." As the evening wound down, Richard found himself standing with Maria and Luna on the center's small balcony, looking out over the city lights. "No more nightmares?" he asked Luna. "No more nightmares," she confirmed. "Just good dreams now." "What do you dream about?" "The future," Luna said, "and it's beautiful." 6 months later, Richard stood in the lobby of the Morrison Foundation's first completed homeless shelter, watching Luna lead a group of children in what she called circle time. The shelter housed 30 families, providing not just beds and meals, but education, job training, and the kind of comprehensive support that could break the cycle of poverty. "She's remarkable," said Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the child psychologist they'd hired to work with the shelter's youngest residents. "I've never seen anyone connect with traumatized children the way Luna does." "It's a gift," Richard said, watching his daughter gently coax a story from a shy 6-year-old named Samuel. "She sees what they need." "Speaking of gifts," Marcus said, joining them with a stack of papers, "I have some news about the Foundation's expansion." Richard and Marcus had spent the past 6 months rebuilding Morrison Holdings while simultaneously developing the Foundation. It had been challenging work, requiring them to learn how to trust each other and how to balance their different management styles, but the results were beyond Richard's wildest dreams. "The Chicago site is approved," Marcus continued, "and we have 3 more cities interested in hosting Morrison Foundation shelters. At this rate, we'll have 20 locations operational within 5 years. "That's incredible," Richard said, "but can we maintain the quality of services with that kind of expansion?" "That's where Luna comes in," Marcus said with a smile. "She's been working on something she calls the Helper Program." Richard raised an eyebrow. "The Helper Program?" "Kids who've been helped by the Foundation helping other kids. Luna says children who've been through trauma understand it better than adults. She wants to train older kids to mentor younger ones." "That's actually brilliant," Dr. Walsh said. "Peer support programs have shown remarkable success rates." "Where does she come up with these ideas?" Richard asked. "She says the ideas come to her in dreams," Marcus explained, "but I think she's just naturally empathetic. She understands suffering because she's lived it." Richard watched Luna help Samuel with his reading, her patience infinite as she guided him through each word. His daughter had never complained about her early years of poverty, never expressed bitterness about his absence, but she channeled that experience into compassion for others. "Daddy!" Luna called out, waving him over. "Samuel has something to tell you." Richard walked over to where the children were gathered. Samuel, who had been mute for the first 2 weeks after arriving at the shelter, looked up at him with bright eyes. "I can read a whole book now," Samuel said proudly, holding up a picture book about dinosaurs. "That's wonderful," Richard said, kneeling down to Samuel's level. "What's your favorite dinosaur?" "The T-Rex. Because he's scary, but he's also just trying to survive." "That's very wise," Richard said, meeting Luna's eyes over Samuel's head. She had taught this child more than reading. She had taught him that survival was not something to be ashamed of. That evening, Richard found Maria in their home office, working on the Foundation's quarterly report. They had moved into a house in Queens, close to the shelter and to Maria's family, trading Richard's sterile penthouse for a home filled with warmth and laughter. "The numbers are incredible," Maria said, looking up from her computer. "We've helped over 200 families in 6 months. The job placement rate is 85%. And 70% of the families have moved into permanent housing." "Those are just statistics," Richard said, settling into the chair beside her desk. "What matters is that we're changing lives." "Luna's changing lives," Maria corrected. "We're just providing the resources." "She gets that from you," Richard said. "The compassion, the instinct to help others. I was too focused on building wealth to notice that the real treasure was right in front of me. Maria reached over and took his hand. You found us when we all needed each other most. That's what matters. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Luna hadn't stopped me on the street that day. Gee, she would have found another way, Maria said with certainty. Luna was determined to save you, and she doesn't give up easily. As if summoned by their conversation, Luna appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. I can't sleep, she said. I keep thinking about the new kids who are coming tomorrow. Are you worried about them? Richard asked. No, Luna said, climbing onto his lap. I'm excited. There's a little girl named Emma who's been living in a car with her mom. She's scared, but she's also brave. I think she and Samuel will be good friends. How do you know about Emma? Maria asked. I saw her in a dream. She has red hair and freckles, and she loves to draw. Her mom is a teacher, but she lost her job and her house when she got sick. Richard exchanged a look with Maria. Luna's dreams about incoming residents were always accurate, down to the smallest details. We'll take good care of Emma and her mom, Richard promised. I know, Luna said, settling more comfortably in his lap. Daddy, do you remember when you were sick and you had dreams about water? Yes, the drowning dreams. They were terrible. You weren't drowning, Luna said. You were swimming toward us. The water was just all the bad things you had to get through to find your family. Richard felt tears sting his eyes. Is that what you saw? That's what I've always seen. You were never lost, Daddy. You were just taking the long way home. 1 year later, Richard stood before the United Nations General Assembly, addressing a special session on global homelessness. The Morrison Foundation had become an international model for comprehensive family support, with shelters operating in 12 countries and a waiting list of cities eager to implement their programs. The solution to homelessness isn't just housing, Richard said, looking out at the assembled delegates. It's about recognizing that every person has value, every family has potential, and every child deserves a chance to dream. In the audience, Maria and Luna sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Marcus was there too, along with Dr. Walsh and Samuel, who had become Luna's unofficial little brother and the Foundation's youngest spokesperson. But I'm not here to talk about statistics or policy, Richard continued. I'm here to talk about a little girl who changed my life by having the courage to tell a stranger the truth about himself. He smiled at Luna, who gave him an encouraging nod. 2 years ago, I was a dying man who didn't even know he was dying. I was successful by every measure society uses: wealth, power, recognition. But I was spiritually bankrupt. I had no family, no real friends, no purpose beyond accumulating more money. Then an 8-year-old girl named Luna Santos stopped me on a Manhattan Street corner and saved my life. Not just by diagnosing my cancer, but by showing me what I was really suffering from, the poverty of the heart that comes from living only for yourself. The assembly was completely silent, hanging on every word. Luna taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or assets. It's measured in the lives you touch, the families you help heal, and the love you choose to share. She showed me that the most important business in the world is the business of caring for each other. Richard paused, looking directly at Luna. Today, the Morrison Foundation announces our most ambitious project yet, a global network of family centers that will provide comprehensive support to 1 million families over the next 10 years. We're calling it the Luna Initiative, named after the little girl who reminded a lost man that everyone deserves a chance to come home. The assembly erupted in applause. Luna's face was glowing with joy, not because of the recognition, but because of the promise that millions of families would receive the help they needed. After the speech, the family gathered for dinner at a small restaurant near the UN building. Samuel regaled them with stories from his new school, where he was thriving academically and socially. Marcus shared updates from the Foundation's latest expansion into South America. Maria talked about the new training program for shelter staff. But Richard was content to simply listen, marveling at how full his life had become. The cancer had been gone for over a year, but more importantly, the emptiness that had plagued him for decades had been replaced by something infinitely more valuable: purpose, love, and the deep satisfaction that came from knowing he was exactly where he belonged. "Daddy," Luna said as they walked back to their hotel, "I have something to tell you." "What is it, sweetheart?" "I don't have the dreams anymore, the ones where I see people who need help." Richard stopped walking, concerned. "Is that bad?" "No," Luna said with a wise smile. "It's good. It means I did what I was supposed to do. I found you. We saved Uncle Marcus, and now we're helping lots of families. My job is done." "Your job is never done," Richard said, picking her up and spinning her around. "You're stuck with us forever." "Good," Luna laughed. "I like being stuck with you." As they walked through the city lights, Richard reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A chance encounter with a homeless child had revealed the daughter he never knew he had, reunited him with the woman he'd never stopped loving, and given him a brother he'd never known existed. But most importantly, Luna had shown him that the greatest treasures in life aren't found in boardrooms or bank accounts. They're found in the simple act of opening your heart to the people who need you most. "I love you, Luna," he whispered as they entered the hotel. "I love you too, Daddy, and I'm proud of you for learning how to love yourself. You taught me that." "No," Luna said, settling into his arms. "I just reminded you. The love was always there. You just forgot how to use it." And as Richard looked at his daughter, this incredible, wise, compassionate little girl who had saved his life in every way a person could be saved, he realized that some miracles come disguised as ordinary moments. And some angels have scraped knees and tangled hair and the most beautiful hearts in the world. The Morrison family was finally complete, not because they had found each other, but because they had learned that being found was just the beginning. The real magic happened when you chose to stay found, to build something beautiful together, and to pass that love on to everyone whose life you had the privilege to touch. And in that moment, Richard Morrison knew that he was the richest man in the world.